Bienvenidos amigos, es su amigo Carlos Antonio Flores, aka Flo the Businessman. We're here at Latitude 2024 in beautiful San Diego, California. I'm currently being accompanied by Rubi Barragan. Did I say that correct?
Yes.
Barragan. And you had mentioned earlier, where is that last name from?
Well, I was about to say it in Spanish, but my dad is from Mexico City and my mom is from Torreon.
Yes, one of my business partners, Gina Dewar, she had mentioned that I guess it's a pretty famous last name in el norte de Mexico, no?
Which is funny because I have not met another Mexican that I know whose last name is Barragan. So
Yeah, I haven't really met that last name either. That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, where was it from? But thank you, Gina, for that. Well, here at Latitude, you're probably going to see a lot of that, where we're mixing between Spanish and English. Latitude is a very popular event. It's been growing throughout the years, I would say. And you see a lot of people feel comfortable both switching from English to Spanish, very comfortable just speaking English or very comfortable just speaking Spanish or sometimes Spanglish. Will you confirm? Or?
sí.
So a little bit about you. So you're originally from Los Angeles, correct? And can you talk a little bit about your journey of now working with Chase?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Los Angeles. I kind of grew up in different areas of Los Angeles. I know we talked about a little bit about Koreatown, Burbank, and then my parents live somewhere between Pico Rivera and Whittier now. So I'm born and raised there, and I love the city, and I love that area. Coming to San Diego, it's so beautiful out here.
Yeah, we're looking at that.
I know, it's really, really nice. So my journey to JPMorgan Chase. So I worked in news for about 10 plus years. I went to school for journalism. I did my undergrad at LMU, and then I did my graduate degree at Columbia in New York City. I went to their journalism school. After that, for me, it's always been really important to have a hand in Spanish media. I grew up reading La Opinión. My dad grew up reading La Opinión, and so together at the breakfast table, we would just always open up the newspaper, and I always thought, oh my gosh, I know I'm gonna have my name printed there one day, and then my dad's gonna read it, and he's gonna be really happy. And so luckily I got an internship at La Opinión, and I was able to get a few things published there, and that kind of started my love for journalism. And so I was in that industry for 10 plus years. And I worked at the Telemundo network in Miami and Los Angeles, and I worked at Snapchat News and Spectrum News for the last 5 plus years prior to me going to JPMorgan Chase. And I decided to really make the move to communications because I was just looking for a little bit more growth in my field. And if you're not familiar with the news industry, growth is a little bit difficult because a lot of newsrooms are smaller, especially if you're at the local level. There's like one executive producer, one senior producer, and one associate producer. So sometimes you can reach a ceiling, and even though you do a lot of great work and you've been there for years, it is really tough to kind of break through that and get to the next level. So I wanted to go somewhere where I felt like I was going to be able to get some of that growth, and I was going to learn new things, and I felt like I learned everything that I could from news at that time. But I obviously entered news because I love storytelling. And what made me excited about working at JPMorgan Chase is that there's so many stories that we can tell, and I feel like people think about banks in a very linear way. On the retail side, they think of it as a branch or a credit card, or you going into a branch and very transactional, exactly. And it's a lot more than that. I mean, I speak to our community managers on the daily, which are people that are located inside our community centers, and they speak to people who have either never opened a bank account, don't have any idea of how to create a budget, have never been taught how to create a budget, have never been taught what a credit card is, and it's really exciting to see people learn and then use the knowledge that they have to then, pursue something like starting a new business, or pursue something like going to see family that they haven't seen in 30 years, either in Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, wherever. So those are the stories that I love telling, and people don't really know about that. People don't know the extent to which we help, like, on a daily basis and in a very personal, individual level. So
Great answer. I guess a follow up to that, how would you say that your past experience has helped you in what you currently are working with within JPMorgan Chase? And maybe you could talk a little bit more about your role within JPMorgan Chase.
So I sit on what we call the regional communications team. So I help to lead media relations firm-wide for Southern California. So San Diego, Los Angeles, Orange County, the Inland Empire, Riverside County, Ventura County. All of that is in the markets that I cover. And as I was mentioning, storytelling is very, very important. And part of my job is to not just protect our reputation, but also like uphold it. And so for me, as I was saying, trying to find very unique stories is something that I personally have tried to do. Coming from news has really helped me to understand A, what a story is, B, who am I pitching to. I have lots of friends that work across, various mediums, and so sometimes I can text them or call them up and be like, I've got this great story, I know that you're gonna love it, or I know a certain reporter that likes to work in a certain, industry or field, like housing. Housing's really important in Los Angeles. Like, let me call up, this reporter that I know who does a lot of good stories in housing. And so it's allowed me to be very vigilant about what I feel like is a good story at work. And so because I work with across the firm for all of our lines of business, so the commercial bank, on the retail side, business banking, I work with, bankers, I work with community managers, I work with all kinds of people, and each person has their own story to tell, and then the stories of other people that they've worked with, or, small businesses that they've worked with, companies that they've worked with, people that they've helped throughout, the 30 plus, 10 plus, 5 plus, 2 plus years that they've been working there. So for me, I just always like to start off with a conversation of like, tell me about yourself. Why did you come here? What do you do on a daily basis? Who do you talk to? And then I kind of sit and go through the weeds of like, okay, tell me about today and what made you really happy today about the interactions that you had. And then you start picking off a little bit of, complex or non-complex stories that you're like, oh, okay, I wouldn't have never thought about that. For example, one of our community managers, at our Crenshaw location, she was telling me about how this woman came into the branch and she only spoke Spanish, and she came here when she was really young from Mexico, and her parents stayed back in Mexico, and she said she hadn't seen them in 30 plus years, and this person now had children. And so she came into our branch and all she wanted was to understand how she could build a budget to buy plane tickets so that her kids could go see her grandparents for the very first time. And so we helped her build a budget. We were like, okay, you have to save X amount of money every month or every week, and it was something very, very simple. And then she accomplished that task, and she went and she took her kids to go see her parents. And you never think about those things, right? You never think about, let me go into the branch and it's gonna reconnect me with my family. And that, I'm only getting that because I'm asking, tell me about an interaction that you had today. Tell me about something that really made an impact in what, you had to do today. So for me, like, finding stories is really about asking people about their day, asking people where they come from, and just having a normal conversation like you and I are having, and then taking that and letting it process a little bit and thinking about, okay, what's the larger story, and who do I feel like would be able to report on this?
So a follow-up question to that, do you have like a checkoff list or like a matrix in regards, because I'm sure there's a lot of beautiful stories to be shared, right, with multiple stakeholders. How do you go and you filter, like, this one over that one, or if at all?
I mean, I think it just depends on, quite a few different things. A, what are our business priorities for the year is one of them. Two, kind of, what's happening in the actual month, locally, nationally, and globally. For example, this month is Hispanic Heritage Month. So for me, I'm like, okay, it's really important that we showcase the Latino Hispanic community. Where are our Hispanic Heritage Month stories? Let me look for those. And I kind of put everything else not off to the side, but just, less centered than maybe some of our Latino Hispanic stories, because I think that that's really important to share. And so Another thing is, if somebody comes to me and says, as I was mentioning to you, we had a veteran home giveaway earlier this week. And so that's a priority, right? Because it's happening in real time and I have a deadline to meet of when this veteran was going to get the keys to their house. So it really just depends on like timing. Again, both at the local, national, and global level. It also depends on kind of what's happening for that month, what I feel like is a really good story for whatever climate we're in, and then also just kind of overall what I feel like reporters are looking for. Like I'll speak to some reporters and they'll say, this month I'm looking for X, or I really know this person's looking at, housing. Do we have any housing grants that we're giving? Are we involved in any housing projects, etc.? So it really just depends, honestly. There's not a perfect formula ever. And sometimes you think I have a great story and then you give somebody else another story and they like that better. And that has nothing to do with my strategy. It has everything to do with what the reporter in the station is looking for, or what their availability is, right? They could really want to cover one story. They might not have the chance, but there's another story the following week that they might have more availability to cover. So it really depends.
Thank you for that answer. I guess last question I have is, I noticed that JPMorgan Chase is very well represented here at Latitude. There's a lot of you guys walking around here. Is there a particular reason, or are you guys really leaning into the Latino Hispanic market?
So I don't think there's a particular reason. I think we've always had a really good focus on the Latino Hispanic community. So a lot of the people that you see here today are part of our Advancing Hispanics and Latino initiative. And so that strategy is really geared towards just getting more recognition for this community. And it's a range of things. It's small businesses, it's people making an impact, it's, housing in certain communities. It can be a range of things. And I think it's really important to show up. And, I'm Latina, I'm Mexican. And so for me, I'm like on board for all of this. And also we just employ, Hispanics and Latinos, so that's also a very important factor. And so I love being here with my colleagues. As we mentioned, there's a difference when you go into a conference or an event and you see somebody else who's been through the same struggles as you've seen someone else that's grown up in the same neighborhoods that you've grown up, or that speaks Spanish, and you just find a little bit of comfort in that, because you're like, oh, these are my people, these are the people that I've grown up with, these are the people that have celebrated the same things that I've celebrated. And that's not to say that when I'm not around Hispanic and Latinos that I don't feel that, but it is a lot stronger when you're together. And I think for us, being here is very, very important. We've shown up like quite a few times in the last couple of years. We're even having, a retired JPMorgan Chase person who's being celebrated at the gala tomorrow. I think we do a lot of great work for this community, and it's really important, especially during Hispanic Heritage Month, that you show up for the Hispanic and Latino community. And as you saw earlier this week, we have the GDP report that says that we're the #1 consumers. I'm sure I'm a very big portion of that. I love to shop. But it is true, right? It is true, and it is something to think about when you're doing business, when you're talking to people, when you're explaining things about, financial literacy. It is really important because we're spending our money that we worked hard for, just like everybody else. And it's been a great event. I'm really excited to be here. I know everybody else is really excited to be here. So I'm glad that we've shown up continuously.
Well, I appreciate that you guys showed up, and I appreciate you making time, because I know you're very busy. So thank you so much for being and giving us this time. And more to come, more to follow. Please follow us with La Revista Binacional.